Hey guys, welcome to the Beefy Sandwich Subcast. This is going to be an MMO cast. We're basically going to discuss MMOs for as long as we can
Hell yes.
over the coming weeks. It will be a short, well, I say a short series. It's probably going to end up being quite a long series, but we're going to enjoy it, and so are you.
Yeah, that's my hope. Me and Wayne, if you don't know us already, we love our MMOs. We're madly into MMOs, and we love to just chat and talk about random MMO discussions. So I think this is the perfect platform for us. I think in discussion.
And I know for myself, MMOs they've definitely taken the major part of my gaming life.
Oh yeah,
at
absolutely.
least 80% of my gaming life.
Yeah. In fact, to be honest, unless I'm playing like a co-op or single player, a co-op or any other like online game with you guys, I'm playing an MMO by myself.
Yeah. Especially like newer ones, like new free ones that come out, because sometimes you can find a really nice MMO that's sort of up and coming.
Yeah. Only to find it's like just as generic as the other 16,000.
Yeah.
Which we'll go into one day eventually.
Yes, there is so much on our list. Basically, if you watched our last video, you already know that we want to keep these to like a sort of like a half an hour length.
Yeah.
But we do want to get through a lot. Like, we want to get through, skill systems, Trinity systems, leveling systems, sandboxing, what different MMOs have to offer. We're going to compare some eventually, I'm sure. Our own personal experiences. So as you can tell, it's not something we can get through in a half an hour.
No. It's literally half an hour to cover every sort of aspect of MMOs. Like you mentioned, there's so much to cover. You know, we got guild systems, combat, trade skills, questing, even things like lore and, you've said it already, class systems and skills and stats. We're gonna have all of that in later episodes. Today specifically, however, we're gonna target, well, actually, it's a big subject, really. What we're going to go for. It's huge. I mean, and I always find it to be like, very important when, in MMOs, well, the ones that I enjoyed, this is like a huge part of it. And without it, I don't know, it feels almost empty for me.
Yeah, definitely. If you're not aware yet, we're talking about the Trinity system.
We probably should have said so. Yeah. Sorry, Wayne, what is the Trinity system?
Okay, so it's the basic idea, for those of you who don't know, it's the basic idea that in an MMO you have three main roles. You have your tank, your DPS, and your healer. Now your tank is the guy who he'll have all of his abilities will normally have high aggro. Aggro is it's like taunting. Basically, there'll be an aggro table. There'll be points on this aggro table. Whoever has the most aggro from this aggro table will have
the attention of the enemy.
Yes, the attention of the enemy.
Much. Yeah.
So basically, your tank's there to do that. He'll normally have skills that will buff him up for defense. He'll normally have, not always, but normally they'll have either very high hit points or they'll just take very small damage. But they won't do much damage to the target. They're all about just keeping the damage off of the team. Then you've got your DPS. That stands for damage per seconds. They're basically your damage dealers. It's very straightforward. They hit buttons, they do damage. And then you have your healers, who obviously they're there just to keep the team alive.
Pretty self-explanatory, the healer.
Yeah. Normally, in like an 8-man, in like a normal 8-man group, for example, it's not exactly a big raiding team, but 8-man makes this simple. You'll normally have a single target healer and an AoE healer. So, you sort of got all bases covered. If there's a mechanic and your entire team needs some healing, your AoE healer will come in, help out with there. And, if your tank has taken some heavy damage, your single target healer will have them up in just a couple of seconds. Or if you lost aggro and your DPS took some damage, healer again, he'll have them back up in no time.
Yeah, so, I mean, it doesn't, and not just with in raids, it's like just a generic group of thing as well. You have that same setup, like you said, the tank, the healer, and the DPS in groups, that's where you'll find this Trinity system, like the base of it. In a lot of MMOs.
Yeah, definitely.
Although which we're going to go into, a lot of MMOs are trying to break away from. And if you've ever played an MMO, you've probably encountered this in some form or another, whether you've noticed it or not. You've got the big, like you said, the heavy guy, the one doing the damage, and then you've got the one healing. And it always seems to, come down to this in MMOs when you're grouping with people.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really see too many healers running around together, damaging, tanking with them, as healers. It just doesn't work too well.
Yeah, definitely. Because it's just, I like the idea that classes are made to, personally, because I grew up with it, I like the idea that classes were made to do certain things.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get too heavy into classes. Obviously, all classes have enough, used to at least, have enough utility to be able to do all stuff anyway. But, I just love the idea that, like, if you've got, I'm going to use 8-man groups throughout this entire cast just because it's easy to work with.
Yeah.
Whenever I say 8-man group, imagine 2 tanks, 4 DPS and 2 healers. Generic. It's really nice knowing that if you've got a small group of 8 friends, they'll, if one of your healers or DPS aren't there, you're relying on them to turn up so you can start your raids or your small PvE runs where you're just going to go and slay some beasts or whatever, or your quests. I just love the idea. It sort of, I think it really
dependency.
Yeah.
And you have to rely on these sort of roles to work, and you're forced to work together.
Yeah, exactly that. It brings the whole multiplayer experience into it rather than just being able to, I mean, obviously you can normally pick someone up if they don't turn up, but, like healers or tanks, depending on the game, are normally really hard to come by. So it's really nice to just have to rely on someone to turn up, and then it just feels like, it just feels really good to just go with some mates that have all turned up to do this one thing at the same time.
Yeah. Like, for example, let's say, for instance, there was no Trinity system. Let's say if that was the case, then you could, I don't know, potentially you had the ability to somewhat tank, like you're a hybrid of yourself. You could tank, you could heal, and you could do some DPS. I mean, where do you stand as an MMO if you can do all three?
Mm-hmm.
Because, if you can solo in an MMO, I'll find that if you can solo, you will solo. And that's why I'd hate to see that the MMO games break away from the Trinity system, because it does bring people together and it does force you to group up, because at the end of the day it's an MMO and it's a group, it's team play. If you want to play a solo game, you play a solo game, whereas an MMO you sort of expect to play with other people, in fact thousands of other people.
Yeah, exactly that. Like, the common complaints with the Trinity system is, hey, what if I don't have friends that are playing the game? Or, hey, what if I'm not so good with talking to other people or getting to know people, but I want to play this game? To be honest though, like, if you're in an MMO, you sort of need the skills to be able to socialize and adapt to your surroundings and sort of get to know people.
Yeah.
So if you can't do that, then maybe then single player games or even just normal multiplayer games with your friends would probably be better. Yeah. I don't understand that complaint. If it wasn't for the Trinity system, I don't think I'd have played some of the MMOs for as long as I did, because it was that whole Trinity system that kept me in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree. I mean, and there are some games nowadays that are, they're trying their absolute best and they're working really hard to break away from the Trinity system like it's a bad thing. For instance, I can say Guild Wars. I played Guild Wars. You've played Guild Wars. You played it quite a bit actually, and so have I. But I never found myself having to group up with others for the healer or for the tank or for the DPS, because I found that I could do all three by myself, and I just ended up being able to almost solo my way to end game, and never actually grouping up. Because there was no Trinity system. I didn't have to depend on anyone. And as a result, I played an MMO by myself. And it didn't feel like an MMO the way, an MMO should be.
Exactly that. Like you said, I did play it quite heavily myself. In fact, it's only been in the last week or two that I've sort of burned myself out on it a bit and I've taken a bit of a break.
Mm-hmm.
But I got into the meta, I got into the speed clearing. I got pretty hardcore into what I can only describe as a very soft core MMO. And the meta, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know what meta is, it's basically the current best way to go about the game. The current best build, which is basically your skills, your skill trees, etc. as a team. The meta team is go completely squishy DPS, so you die really quick if you took too much damage, and it's basically a race. You have to damage the enemy before it kills you. There's not really much healing involved, and there's no tanking. There's absolutely no tanking abilities in the entire game. All the classes have the ability to heal themselves a little bit.
Yeah.
But
I found it to be a more DPS game. In my own opinion, I thought it was more of a DPS game.
Exactly. The whole game is a DPS race. There is absolutely no Trinity system whatsoever there. And that is why I've burnt myself out so quickly. I played it for maybe 3 months, I'd say.
Yeah.
And
you experienced the majority of the game as well, didn't you?
Yeah. I've experienced everything.
So it's not like we just picked it up one day and now we're just throwing these, we're just, putting it down, because we have experienced the game and we have put time into it, and these are what we've come out with.
Yeah, definitely. I was that guy who someone could come up to and ask a question about anything or any class or any dungeon or any city, and I'd be able to answer it like that.
Yeah.
Because of how easy it was to get there. It was so easy that I could solo the second hardest dungeon in the game on my own. Obviously, because I can solo it. That's how easy the game was, because there was no Trinity system needed.
Yeah, because they focus so hard on being able to, to get rid of the Trinity system. Yeah. And obviously the only way to go around getting rid of the Trinity system is to make everyone independent. Well, able to almost solo, like we mentioned, the ability to heal and do damage and, tank somewhat.
And in doing
everyone was a hybrid of everything.
Yeah, and in doing so, they can't make the dungeons as hard as they could be. Yeah. Because normally in a typical Trinity game, I'm just gonna use Star Wars: Old Republic because it's my most recent Trinity game that I played. You'd have a raid now. I'm not gonna get too heavy into mechanics because that'll be for another time. But basically, let's just focus on one move. The boss would use an attack that would one-shot your healer or would one-shot your DPS, but your tank could take it. He'd get pretty low, but that's your healer's issue after. They can get him back out. Your tank also have cooldowns, damage reduction, and the mechanic would work something like you would lose all aggro tables would be reset, and your tank would have to get aggro back within 2 seconds or something. It sounds simple enough, but I'm making it simple so you can understand.
Right.
And they would instantly have to get the aggro back, because if not, if it targeted one of your healers, which it normally would, because typically healers after
get a lot
of aggro because they're healing the team. If one of your healers are down, and let's say that you can't revive them for whatever reason, your raid is pretty much going to be
over. That's it. Yeah.
However, in Guild Wars, in non-Trinity games at least, because there are no tanks to be able to take those heavy hits, they're just not there. It's just a lot easier.
But because obviously you don't specialize to tank or to heal or to DPS. You're a hybrid of everything. Whereas, like we said, in the Trinity system, like you mentioned in Star Wars, in previous games that I've played with Trinity systems, you specialize in these roles. The tank will be, damage absorption and high HP. They'd specialize in this. They couldn't heal. They couldn't do it. They weren't a utility class as well. They couldn't do, they weren't hybrids. They would specialize, and as a result, they were the best at what they did. But they relied heavily on everyone. Every person relied heavily on each other.
Yeah, and I loved that. I loved the fact that my typical role would be a hero. That was it's always been my favorite Trinity role to play. I've played tanks and DPS quite a lot as well, but I loved the fact that my job was to keep my team alive. Everybody was relying on me and my co-hero to keep them alive, while I was relying on my tanks to make sure that my DPS took as little damage as possible, and relying on my DPS to stay out of unnecessary raids damage and burn the boss down in time, that we didn't need to worry about invading timers and other things like that, things that we'll get into in later casts. I love the fact that
yeah, and can I just say that's what I love as well, because what you just touched upon as well, the fact that, you know, you were the healer, and it meant that your tank would do absolutely everything in its power to protect you, knowing that if you died, that was it, he was dead. You know, whereas like, let's say in a game with no Trinity, if your healer died, it wasn't a huge deal because you could just take on healing yourself, or the guy next to you could just heal, you know, carry on healing for him. It made no difference whatsoever.
Yeah, if someone
You know,
dies,
the Trinity system, you know, you got to protect that healer. You know, you got to protect. You know, you got to hold the aggro, because otherwise, you don't hold that aggro. That's it. Your healer's gone, your DPS is gone, and then you're gone, and then that's the end of it.
it's just, yeah, it's priorities. You have to have
Right?
priorities, or you're done for. Okay?
You're forced to look out for one another because of how dependent you are on one another, and it makes sense.
Yeah, and I love that it might sound silly to some of you, but in doing that day in, day out, it brings you closer as a group of friends as well, because you're constantly relying on each other to do well. If one of you messes up, you're all done. You're all done for. There's no two ways about it, you know.
I feel like we're just bashing on everyone who doesn't like the Trinity system.
No.
I mean, I'm sure there were like great. Okay, let's. So I think we've given like every reason why the Trinity system is a must and why we love it, and you know, there's no bias here, but
there's a lot of bias.
There is a lot of bias. Why wouldn't somebody want the Trinity system in an MMO? Wayne, any ideas?
Well, there's pros and cons to every argument, you know. I did enjoy the change only briefly personally, but I enjoyed the change from Trinity to no Trinity because it was something new. It was something that hadn't been done before, or has only been done in the very recent stages.
Yeah.
But what I also found is, like I said, it's making for very soft core games now. Mm-hmm. By that I mean very easy to play games that you don't need to be so focused on. So.
Right.
And like if you look at a game, I'm going to pull out EverQuest 1 from like years ago. Okay, I'm not going to get into too much detail, but that game was insane. You would have hundreds of people just to take on a boss using this Trinity.
And I know this from experience because I'm a hardcore original EverQuest player.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And that was maybe 15 years ago now, maybe even a bit longer. I'm not even sure, but it was a long time ago either way.
Yeah.
And now
you're right. You could spend get hundreds of people for a raid boss. I mean, there were raids that nobody could complete for years after the release of the game because that was just how difficult it was. It wasn't until like 5 or 6 expansions later that they could actually go back and actually complete those raids. At no point did they decide to bring decrease the raid difficulty, you know, for people. No, they said this is it, and that's how it's going to stay, and you're going to have to work your way up, and eventually you can come back to it. Otherwise, you ain't going to get it.
Yeah.
You know? Whereas now, you know, they people don't have the patience to do that. They want to be able to complete everything straight away, and you have to give them the ability to do so. Otherwise, I don't know, people will complain. They don't have the patience. I don't know what it is, but
exactly. They want to be spoon fed.
Right.
But I'm going to go back to Star Wars: The Republic again because this is a game I have a lot of experience
in. Cool. Let's keep referencing MMOs.
Yeah, basically, you had story modes. Your raids, you'd have a story mode raid, a hard mode raid, and a nightmare mode raid. They were like this raid, like for each raid, that is. So it'd be the same raids, but it'd be at different difficulty scales. With each difficulty, you'd have harder mechanics, etc., etc.
Yeah.
It would be harder and harder. Now, normally, you'd expect your story mode to be for casual players. By casual, I mean people who played every now and again. They just wanted to get in, kill some stuff, get some awesome loot. Then you'd have the hard modes, which is for players that are on it quite a lot, but they're average players. You know, they're good, but they're not great. And then you'd have your nightmare raids for the hardcore players, the people that were in there like almost every night until they got it finished. You know, people who some people would say that they have no lives because of how much they're playing. Personally, I don't care what you say. I loved that personally, but
I find that to be the only way to live.
Exactly.
Right. But I can imagine those sort of that sort of instance would have been heavy on the Trinity system.
Yeah, definitely. However, even though you had your story mode, your hard mode, and your nightmare modes, in this day and age now, you have people will complain, oh, nightmare mode is impossible. It wasn't impossible because I was in a guild that had already finished it. We would compete with the leading guilds in the world to get this stuff done. And we would finish this, and you'd still have people on the forums complaining that it was impossible.
Yeah.
15 years ago, they would say deal with it. In this day, they say, all right, cool, we'll make everything easier. And that is where I think, getting back onto our original point, I think that's where the no Trinity system comes from, because without a Trinity system, you don't need to be you don't need to be so reliant on people, and B, you don't need to be so skilled in like what you're doing, because you've got 5 people who are all doing the same thing, and if you die, so what? You've got another 4 people. This is not necessarily 5 or 4 people.
But yeah, I get what you mean.
Yeah,
that's a great point. Yeah,
and as much as I dislike that myself, because I'm much more hardcore into MMOs. Once I get into it, I'm always on it. And I love the Trinity system already as bias. However, for the way that MMOs are going these days, they're catering a lot more to softcore or casual or mediocre players who want the easier raids, who want the easier runs. They just want it to be easy because they're so used to. Because that's what games are in this day and age. Look at the Sega Mega Drive, man.
Yeah, it's
Some
true.
of those games were horribly hard. Now you can complete a game in like insane difficulty. Gears of War, for example, in like what 14 hours. I think I completed Gears of War 2 on my first playthrough.
Yeah.
Well, so that's why I think.
Yeah,
that's a good side to it.
Yeah, if I can, and with MMOs as well, you'll constantly forever hear, it's a WoW clone. That's a WoW clone, or this new MMO, that's another WoW clone. The thing is, since, the release of WoW, World of Warcraft, I found that every MMO from that point, which has been released, has stuck to the WoW, structure of being completely watered down, completely super easy, and that's why a lot of these MMOs seem so generic and so easy, because they keep to that structure. They don't want to change things up. They don't want to make anything difficult, because I think people are so used to what they may be used to with World of Warcraft that they don't want to have to, to delve deeper into the game, make it tougher for them. Once you've made it easy for them, they want to keep going that way. I'm struggling to get my words out.
No, but I know exactly what you're saying. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean,
and you are completely right.
I read something. I was reading up on EverQuest Next. Now that's it's the next EverQuest game to come out. I mean, we've had EverQuest 1, 2, and now we're going to soon to have EverQuest Next. And on there was somebody who released a statement, and that's the Holy Trinity came about because of primitive MMO AI. And that was their opinion on the Trinity system, and because they're also trying to say how they're going to get rid of the Trinity system, just like the Elder Scrolls. We've mentioned this already, but a lot of MMOs are trying to deviate from the Trinity system and get rid of it. But I find that it's completely there's no reason to get rid of it, because it just works, in an MMO it works perfectly.
Yeah,
and I don't think it's right to say that the Trinity system came about because of primitive AI. That's not the case. It came about because it just seems that that's the way a group seems to form. It's just the easiest way to group. To have someone to take damage, have someone to heal, and have someone to DPS. If you didn't mention the Trinity system, I'd feel like it would just form on its own.
Yeah, it's just a natural way of things things happening. Like if you see I'm trying to think of a real life example, but I'm struggling to do so. If you see someone, if you're a doctor and you get a patient, you don't heal them because you won't make them better because they're bleeding. You heal them. You make them better because it's your natural ability to do so.
Right. Exactly.
Like. It's just because you think, oh wait, how do I fix this? And that's how you fix it.
That's the way you're going to stray. That's the way it's going to work.
Yeah, that's probably a really awful example, but you get my point.
Right. Well, the points we're trying to make anyway. So we mentioned Guild Wars 2, how it tries to deviate from the Trinity system. ESO. Elder Scrolls Online also is trying to deviate. It boasts smarter AI. So it's saying enemies won't just target tanks, and there won't be a Trinity system. I mean, do you think that's going to work?
I'm trying to stick to just what I've read about it. But well, actually, my own personal opinion, saying I knew nothing about the game, because they're boasting that it's going to be like they're going to try and keep it like a normal Elder Scrolls game. Yes, it's going to work. No, it's not going to work as an MMO. That's how I can see it happening. They want what I can see Elder Scrolls doing is becoming a multiplayer Skyrim or like a multiplayer Elder Scrolls game. Which don't get me wrong, is awesome. I would love to be able to load up my arcane archer or my glass cannon into Skyrim with you or another friend.
Absolutely, yeah.
But that's not what I'm looking for in an MMO personally. An MMO, like you said, like this whole cast has been about. I love the Trinity system. I love that. I don't want to be able to go into ESO or any MMO and solo my way up from level 1 to max level, and then go into raids and dungeons with random people who can barely play the game and finish it.
Right.
And that's what I can see ESO, Elder Scrolls Online ESO. I can see it taking that direction. Right. Because I personally think that they're going to try and stick too hard onto being a multiplayer Skyrim or Oblivion or Morrowind's game.
Right. And I think if they're really gonna be serious, if they're serious about not having the Trinity system, then I feel like they're gonna have to go the same way Guild Wars 2 went, and that's to just have everyone become hybrids and have the ability to do a little bit of everything. Right? Yeah. Because otherwise, if one person specialized in tanking and one specialized in DPS and one specialized in healing, then technically you got a Trinity system there. And they're saying that's not what's going to happen. So the only other way that's going to work is if everyone's a hybrid of everything. You see where I'm getting at with that?
Yeah, I see what you're getting at. But then that also confuses me a little, not you, but ESO. It confuses me a little bit at what they're getting at, because even in I'm going to use Skyrim because that's the game that most of you would have played. You still have your restoration magic. You still have your damage attacks, and you still have characters that can get really heavy into heavy armor, take very little damage. You still it's a single player game. You still have your Trinity system there. However, like in a game like Skyrim, you can become top in all of it. You can become top in restoration damage and tanking. However, in MMOs they tend to limit how much talent and skills you can put into certain things. Right. Which is like even in non-Trinity games, like there's always a limit to how many perks and how many skill points you can have into certain things. So if they're sticking as hard onto other ESO games as they're trying to say they are, they would still be the ability there to have the Trinity system, the tank, DPS, and healer. So
the fact that they're saying the Trinity system won't work,
even though if what they're saying is, to my understanding, it will still be there and you'll be able to play with it. It doesn't make sense to me. Like I'm a bit confused by that personally.
Right. I think when they said the Trinity system won't work, I think what they probably meant is that they don't want you. They don't want you to rely on the Trinity system, but it's not going to be there, because there's no way they can just remove the Trinity system. That would mean to completely remove all tanky abilities and healing abilities and DPS, and just somehow create abilities that are hybrids of these abilities somehow. But that just wouldn't work. People are going to specialize, whether especially for the Elder Scrolls Online that boasts, be who you want to be, mm-hmm. And I want to be a tank, you want to be a healer, the other guy wants to be DPS. What does that make? That makes a Trinity system. So yes, there will be a Trinity system in ESO, whether you believe that there won't be or not, there will be.
The only way they could take that out completely is to just take out healing and tanking from the game, and to do that would be to completely change what every ESO game has ever been about. Like, you'd have to rewrite. Obviously, like, it's a new game and stuff, but they're trying so hard to stick to make it like an Elder Scrolls game. It can't be like an Elder Scrolls game if you take out tankiness and restoration.
Yeah,
you just can't. Like, there's no way. So, what are you going to have? Like, if there was no Trinity system, then you're going to have all this tankiness and all this healing ability there. However, everyone's just going to go DPS because it's completely useless to go tanky or healing. Like, that makes no sense. It hurts my head.
Oh. But, I mean, the Trinity system, I'm not going to say it's all good. I mean, it's going to have its benefits. I mean, I prefer it. You prefer it. I'm sure there are going to be people out there who don't prefer it. For example, I can see why they wouldn't when it comes to things like PvP. Because with PvP, you're going to want to be somewhat diverse when you're going up against someone else. You want to be able to do some sort of damage as well as maybe, do some sort of healing for yourself. So I can see where they may not want the Trinity system in place because it may not work as well with PvP. Because I'd say this, I mean, I didn't love Guild Wars 2. I didn't. However, the PvP it was okay because you were all around, you were all arounder. You could do some damage, you could do some healing, and it kind of worked. It wasn't like World of Warcraft or something where you go over. Sorry, World of Warcraft, I don't know. You got a lot of MMOs where you might have an overpowering tank or a healer who could literally, you could damage him down to like 1% and then he could just heal himself back to 100%. That's kind of ridiculous in PvP.
Yeah.
Whereas, with Guild Wars 2, your healing was limited. Everything was limited to a certain extent. So I think in PvP it may have worked, I guess that's where the Trinity system would be a good place to deviate from.
Yeah, I guess we've really focused on the PvE with the Trinity system.
And that's because I am a PvE player.
Yeah, but like I did play some I loved PvP in Guild Wars 1. It was the best PvP in any game I've ever played, but it was different. You didn't really rely on a Trinity system. It was much more complex.
Yeah.
But I think we should make this a bit of a two-parter and go into the Trinity system with PvP in a second podcast, in a second subcast, in like our next one maybe, because I don't even know why I disregarded PvP as part of the game, because it's totally part of the game.
Yeah, I mean, PvP nowadays, it's a huge part of MMO, and maybe not for me. I don't know if it's for you, but not so much for me, but it is for a lot of people.
It is for me, and it's just because I didn't really like the PvP in Guild Wars 2, and it's the game I've been playing recently, so all these thoughts I'm having are obviously just being are coming from that, because it's the most recent game I've played.
But I mean, we can always touch upon PvP at any time. I mean, that's another huge aspect of MMOs that we're going to have to delve into.
Yeah.
But I mean, up until now, we've really been, specifically talking about PvE just because we're more PvE players, I feel.
Yeah, definitely. But I think in next week, I think we should touch a little bit, like just at the start maybe, just touch a little bit on the Trinity system with PvP.
Absolutely.
I don't think there's going to be too much to talk about there, but
because I really don't have much to say on PvP. I'm not a PvP type of guy, but yeah, there is some stuff to go into there. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Alright guys, well I think we're going to end it here for today. But please share your opinions with us as well. We're really interested in knowing what you guys think. It's fine if you want to come up and say, "Yo, I don't agree with anything you said. It's bullshit." That's cool, I
mean, we're not biased at all. Not only, I mean, Trinity system. Who likes that rubbish?
Yeah. It's like I'd love to. I can only ever find people that like the Trinity system. I would love to talk to somebody who didn't like it. Because then I could have a good debate going. We'd be able to be more open-minded about it. I'm very open-minded. It's hard to be open-minded about something you love so much when everybody also loves it.
Right.
So if you're watching it on YouTube, then throw some comments in there, and we'll get back to each and every one of them if we can.
What can we expect in the next episodes?
I think we'll touch a bit more on this, like we said.
Yeah. I had something else I had, I don't know if I should mention DPS in mind, because that's a huge part of MMO, and I'll go into that further with you, Wayne, later on. But that's something we might touch upon in the next episode. Yeah,
I think we should, especially like the differences between ranged and melee and utility, and just so much to go on in DPS.
Absolutely.
So.
So. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching the Beefy Sandwich subcast.
Yep. Yeah.
MMO edition. I think we need to finish up with something. Wayne. Ding. Wayne,
Ding?
I just leveled up.
Oh well, that was so bad.
That was really bad. If you're not an MMO, then
You won't
what just happened.
Alright, guys.
That made no sense to you whatsoever. So cool.
We'll see you right back here again next week. Thank you for listening and have a great day, evening, morning, whatever.
I'll see you next year. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.